What is God? Quite frankly, I'm not even going to attempt to give a definitive answer, and I'm going to state right from the get, anybody who gives you a definitive answer on what God actually is lying. They're either lying to themselves, they've been lied to, or they just are flat out being dishonest. The best anybody can really do is give a description on what God is. Multiple times in several different sacred texts, including the Bible, God is described as infinite, indescribable, all-powerful, perfect, the center of love, the center of source creation. All of these things are essentially God. And one of the things that pops up time and time again is that God does not change. And people have used this concept and twisted it in so many ways. It's freaking ridiculous. Just to give a proper analogy, compared to the earth and our lives, the sun doesn't ever really change. But our view of the sun does change. And so it appears to have different shapes, sizes, colors, brightness, etc. This same thing can be applied to God. So when somebody says God does not change, and then somebody says, well, God's telling me that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, God didn't tell that to Moses. Okay, well, let's see here. Moses was essentially living in a completely different time with a completely different people. So the message would logically be different. I get so aggravated at religion because religion is far too rigid. It makes definitions that it has no business making because it doesn't have the knowledge to make it. To have faith, if you were to look at faith in more or less scientific terms, faith would basically equate a theory. When you test faith, you are testing the theory to see how true it is. In what ways is it true? There is so many things that have been twisted around because it's more convenient, because it's more controllable, because it's more comfortable, because it benefits more in a short-term fashion. But when ancient people, the people who everything that texts like the Bible is based off of, actually looked at the world, they weren't trying to define the world, they were trying to describe it. They weren't trying to say 1 + 1 = 2 because they didn't have the proper concept for the 1 and the 2. They didn't know where exactly that value was. It's very difficult to describe these things to people when it sounds like you're simply attacking their belief system. It tends to aggravate. And once somebody gets aggravated, they get defensive. Once they get defensive, it becomes impossible to have a cohesive conversation with intelligence involved, with logic to go with it. And if you're looking at what God is, it's all of it. It's the logic, it's the illogic, it's the emotion, it's all of it. There is nothing that isn't of God. The only thing that can be stated is there are things that are done in the proper time, and there are things that are done at the improper time. If you do things too much, it can be bad. If you do things too little, it can be bad. The entire thing is a learning process. When you figure out the responsibility of the process, you find your power. When you find your power and you're able to recognize it for what it is, along with the responsibility, now you have authority. Once you gain that authority, you can begin a completely new school of thought. The process continues on. We're dealing with infinities and we keep trying to limit. We're dealing with wavelengths and we keep trying to particulate. When you try to view things as a single thing, as an object, as something that doesn't change, you cheat yourself. Schrodinger's cat, that's a real thing, believe it or not. You don't necessarily experience both effects, but both effects are in play. You don't have a single dimension. You have many parallel dimensions. They all interweave. People's lives jump from parallel to parallel, depending on the choices they make. Awarenesses or consciousness at an individual level travels along individualized paths through already existing parallel dimensions. Most of these dimensions are so similar that you would never notice a change from one to the other. This is what we call time. And when you recognize how time has a three-dimensional structure, more than that, but you've got space that we already recognize easily has three dimensions. It also, that has more dimensions as well, but that's neither here nor there right now. Time would also echo space. They're interlinked, they're interwoven. Therefore, time would have as many dimensions as space. Since we recognize easily three dimensions of space, we must postulate three dimensions of time. This would equate to multiple alternate dimensions existing side by side, and our experience of time comes from us choosing the dimensions we're in through the choices we make. Now, that's not the only thing that guides us through our dimensions. The environment plays a huge role in this. I don't know why, but I am really struggling to get all this out. I think I need to stop for now and let things ride. As crazy as everything sounds that I say, there is lines of reality that are the basic building blocks of what we recognize as reality. This isn't something that just one or two people can do. This is something anybody can do. What stops people is faith, the theory. Think of this real quick. If Einstein never had the theory, would we have ever imagined the power of atomic fusion? There's a lot of good things and a lot of bad things that can come from something that powerful. When you're looking at the crazy, you are looking at essentially the quantum field of reality around you. It all comes together, it's all part of itself. It's a fractal. You take something from one spot and it affects another. You add something to one spot, it affects another. I guess the last thing I want to add here is as far as effects and how it applies